In the last video, we built the body of our mid-century modern inspired nightstand. I would suggest starting there if you haven't watched that yet. Today, we're going to build the drawers and finish everything up. I planed the wood for the drawer bodies down to 3/4 inch, then I used my jigsaw to rough cut them down to length. I got this new table saw and it's an absolute pleasure to work with thanks to the larger work area and the fence. As you can see, I used an extra piece of wood to help me cut the first straight edge of each of these boards. Then you can just flip it over and cut the second edge without that piece of wood. I proceeded to cut all of the pieces down to width, which is about 5 1/4 inch. I then used this crosscut jig to trim the ends of each boards. I attached a stop block so that I could make precise repeat cuts for cutting the different lengths of drawer pieces. Using a table saw to do crosscuts is really enjoyable, as you can see exactly where the cut's going to go by looking at the blade notch on the jig board itself, and you can also really easily sneak up onto the cuts. Next, I needed to create the dados that'll hold the drawer bottoms. I did this by making one pass over a slightly raised blade, then moving the fence and making another pass. I cut down the drawer bottoms and the back panel out of MDF. To make things a little cleaner, I sprayed the bottoms of the drawers with some spray enamel spray paint. It turned out really well and had a nice glossy finish to it. Before putting the drawers together, I sanded all the boards down to 220 grit, and then I finished them with 2 coats of Danish oil. The drawers are held together with pocket hole screws. You'll see here that I actually had to use a replacement piece of pine for one of the backs of the drawers. This is because I miscut the poplar piece and I ran out of wood. I actually ended up liking it because it shows that someone actually made it and it's not quite perfect. The pocket hole screws are not going to be visible when you're done since they're on the back, which is never seen, and the front, which will be covered up by the drawer fronts. To finish up the drawer body, I slid the bottom panel in the dado and then attached the final side with pocket hole screws. The nice thing about this design is that if the bottom ever breaks or you need to replace it for whatever reason, you can just remove one side and put a new piece in. Next, I cut down and planed the piece of poplar that I would use for the drawer fronts. I rough cut it down with a circular saw, then took it to the table saw to slowly cut down to final size. If you like what you're seeing, why not hit that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up. That way you'll know when new stuff comes out and it'll really help the channel grow. Thanks a lot. After getting things cut just about right, I had to cut one side slightly angled since the inside of the body of my base was not exactly square. I used a belt sander then to get the angle just right. Then I sanded everything down again to 220 grit and finished them with 2 coats of Danish oil. Okay, on to the drawer installation. I did a bit of maths and eventually figured out that the spacing from the bottom to the bottom and top drawer slides would be 3 and 10 1/4 inches respectively. So I cut down 2 boards to act as spacers. Then I drew my center line for the drawer slides that would attach to the drawers. In this case, it's 3 inches from the top. I used a scrap board to ensure the front of the slide was flush with the front of the drawer, and then I drilled the pilot holes and screwed them in. For the second half of the slide that attaches to the cabinet, I started with the top drawer and used my spacer to hold the slide up. Then I measured in from the front, accounting for the depth of my drawer front, drilled pilot holes, and attached them with screws. I repeated the process for the bottom drawer as well, using the smaller spacer. To reconnect the slides, you just align the 2 pieces and push them in. It might take a little extra pressure to get them to seat for the first time. To attach the drawer fronts, I measured 2 locations for the screws, then drilled pilot holes and countersunk them with my pocket hole drill bit. I put them back in the cabinet, applied some wood glue to the drawer front, and then put some hot glue on the drawer itself, which will help hold things together. Once you put the hot glue on, you need to move really fast because it'll dry quickly. I used a spacer on the bottom and in between the drawers that's about 3/32 of an inch thick. I took the drawers out again and drove in some pocket holes to keep everything nice and tight. Finally, I attached the back panel with some brad nails. I'll confess that I was a little bit nervous about building drawers as this was my first time. However, it really wasn't that bad and I would encourage you to try it. I had to wait a few days for my drawer pulls to arrive. To install them, I applied some painter's tape, then measured out the centers for each drawer. Because the drawer fronts were not exactly the same, I drew a line down from the top to make sure that they were exactly in line, since having them vertically aligned is the most important thing visually speaking. I drilled 2 holes per the directions that came with the pulls, then on the inside I countersunk them since the bolts that I had were a little bit too short to reach through the thickness of the front. And I just had to insert the bolts and thread on the pulls and make sure they were nice and tight. I am blown away with how well this turned out. It's definitely the most complex thing that I've ever made, and while it was certainly intimidating to jump into, once I got started and then finished, it was really rewarding. I'll include a SketchUp file in the description for anyone who wants to build this. It doesn't include the actual drawer bodies, since they're going to vary depending on the pulls you buy. In total, I think I spent about $40 on all of the materials for this build. If you enjoyed the video, again, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Also, check out a couple of my other videos and let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks again to all you subscribers out there, and I'll see you in the next episode.